the Lord that was broken down. And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob. This was an order from God. Everything's precise, everything's detailed. To whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel shall be your name. Then with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench around the altar large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. Again, he's being precise, just like Noah was, remember? And he put the wood in order, cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood, and said, Fill your 4 water pots with water, and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. Then he said, Do it a second time. And they did it a second time. And he said, Do it a third time. And they did it a third time. So the water ran all around the altar, and he also filled the trench with water. Why aren't we this precise in our lives as believers? Why aren't we this detailed as leaders of God? What is the matter with us? What seriously, like what's going on with us? You know, there shouldn't be too much going on with us that we can't be like this. That we can't just listen to God like Elijah did, take down notes, and then do it. You know? And not say, okay, God, I hear you. Wait, I'm doing something right now. You know? Okay, God, I hear you. Oh, I'll remember. 5 hours later, what was that, God? You know? Why do we treat God like that? Why is it that we treat God like that? Verse 36 says, And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, it was dark, that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that you are the Lord God, and that you have turned their hearts back to you again. At this point, he's not mocking. At this point, he is very sure of what he is saying, and he is standing on that rock. Verse 38, immediately, it wasn't even like a hesitation. It says, Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice in the night. How big this fire was. Think about how heavy God came. Now, when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and they said, The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. Because I could only imagine how pitch black it was. And then, boom, you know, this big fire out of nowhere. And they're thinking, well, half of us just died from cutting ourselves and from crying out to Baal. And here's this guy, and he listened right away. Verse 40 says, And Elijah said to them, Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let one of them escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and executed them. Then Elijah said to Ahab, Go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of abundance rain. Remember, we were in a famine. So Ahab went up to eat and drink. And Elijah went up to the top of Carmel. Then he bowed down on the ground and put his face between his knees and said to his servant, Go up now, look toward the sea. So he went up and looked and said, There is nothing. And 7 times he said, Go again. So he had to go back 7 times. Then it came to pass the 7th time that he said, There is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising out of the sea. So he said, Go up, say to Ahab, Prepare your chariot and go down before. Now it happened in the meantime that the sky became black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy rain. So Ahab rode away and went to Jezreel. Then the hand of the Lord came upon Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran ahead of Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. I'm going to read part of verse 19, and then I'm going to go into what I have. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Can you imagine how mad Jezebel was? She thought she knew it all. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. She went ahead and just threatened, right? And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life. Elijah just saw the biggest miracle there was to see, and he ran for his life after hearing what Jezebel said. And he went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. He left his servant there, and then he runs some more. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. So he went a little bit further and came and sat down under a broom tree. And this is what he said after he saw this miracle and he was on fire for God and the Spirit was in him and God was working and he prayed, but he didn't pray a good prayer. He said that he might die. And he said, "It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am not better than my fathers." How many times have we gotten to that point in our lives? How many times, I mean, maybe we might have not said die, maybe we might have said, "Come, Jesus, come," you know, which is almost the same thing. But how many times? I mean, I don't know how many times I've said it. Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Arise and eat." Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. There by his head, like he hadn't had to go nowhere. So he ate and drank and lay down again. He ate and drank and lay down again. That's what happens when you're in some kind of sadness, right? And some kind of fear. You just kind of want to just not even not even thinking about it. But look how God is. He lay it down again, and the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." So he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that for 40 days and 40 nights, as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. And there he went into a cave and spent the night in that place. He's still hiding. He's still hiding because he went into a cave. Jesus just came to him twice. I mean, an angel, but he just came to him twice and reassured him and gave him food and everything. And he's still going to a cave. So God have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. He's basically kind of saying, God, well, I have a reason to do this. Then he said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And the Lord, I love God. And that's why I say it all the time to Pastor. And I say, I love how straight up he is. He just tells you how it is. He's like, "That's fine. Great. You're afraid. Great. That happened. Go outside. Get out of the cave. Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." On a mountain, nonetheless, that where everybody can see him. And behold, the Lord passed, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. So it was, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly, a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Do you know why Elijah did that? It's because I'm pretty sure by this point he was ashamed. He was a little bit like, man, I don't know what to do now. I have God, and he's being so good to me. Why? So he covered his face, right? And he's there again by the cave, and God is still, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very zealous." He said it all over again. God, they're continuing to fight, and they want to seek my life and kill me. And verse 15 says that the Lord didn't really care. He said, then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, anoint Hazael as king over Syria." He's just giving him commandments. "Also, you shall anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, as king over Israel." He continues to give him commandments. "And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Mahola, you shall anoint as prophet in your place. It shall be that whoever escapes the word of Hazael, Jehu will kill, and whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elisha will kill. Yet I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." He reassured him and he said, "I have a remnant." Because he's talking and Elijah's saying, "But God, there's 700,000 people that don't believe in you. 700,000 people," and I'm just making a number up, that like Baal and do everything for him. And God's like, "But I have a remnant. But I have a remnant." And that's what he's saying right now to the believers and leaders in Christ. But I have a remnant. Do not be afraid. Be bold and courageous. You're not alone, although you feel like that. Continue the good fight. Remember that what I have told you, I have equipped you for. And that's what he's telling us today. He says, "I have a remnant." And I'm going to stop there. I'll continue a little bit later with the other verses. But I want to go in with a few, excuse me, Practical guidelines. Number one, as we have read all of this, number one, no matter where you are in life, you are still a believer, which means you have that as a title in being an ambassador. That's your title, ambassador. Ambassador of Jesus. You don't have to be an evangelist. You don't have to be a pastor. You're an ambassador of Jesus Christ. And we find that in chapter 18, verses 2 to 6. No matter where you are in life, you are still a believer, which means you have that as a title in being an ambassador of Jesus. Verses 2 to 6 says, So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab, and there was a severe famine in Samaria. And Ahab had called Obadiah, who was in charge of his house. And Ahab had said to Obadiah, Go into the land to all the springs of water and to all the brooks. Perhaps we may find grass to keep the horses and mules alive. So they divided the land between them to explore it, and Ahab went one way and Obadiah another way. We start the chapter with the word of the Lord coming to Elijah, and then him going to meet with Ahab. But in those days, you couldn't present yourself directly to the king. You had to go through his commander-in-chief, right? Somebody that he had put before him. So Elijah had to present himself to Obadiah first, who was basically the chief commander of Ahab. Now, Obadiah was also a prophet of God, and we read that he was protecting about 100 of God's prophets in these times. We know that Obadiah has had a hard task and that his life hasn't been easy in reading what he was doing. But he was being a servant of God while being a servant of an evil man at the same time. So he was still an ambassador of Christ. I'm sure he overheard many things that Jezebel had said and that Ahab had said. I mean, he's that close to the king. How many times have we been there, right, in life with work or wherever we are, and we kind of lose it. We kind of forget who we are in that moment, because like our flesh takes over, right? We forget that we are an ambassador of Christ. And Obadiah did not forget that. Obadiah was like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to do what the king tells me to do. I'm going to go try to find food, try to find water. But here's Elijah, and I'm also going to take care of him. And I'm also going to talk to him. That's what we need to remember, is that we have that as a title. Number two, if you are a believer of Jesus, everyone will recognize you as that. Everyone. If you are a believer of Jesus, everyone will recognize you as that. Verse 7 through 17 says, So the king of Israel called all the elders of the land and said, Verse 7 to 17 in chapter 18 says, Now as Obadiah was on his way, suddenly Elijah met him, and he recognized him and fell on his face and said, Is that you, my lord, Elijah? And then he answered him, It is I. Go tell your master Elijah is here. So first Obadiah recognizes Elijah as a prophet. They were brothers in Christ, right? Recognizing each other. But then also, if we go to, let's see what verse. 17. Then it happened when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said to him, Is that you, troublemaker? So not just Obadiah recognized him as a brother in Christ, but the evil man, the one that doesn't even follow Jesus, recognized him. He recognized him. So everybody is going to recognize you. Here we have someone that doesn't serve the Lord recognizing a man of God. Why? Because he should. They should recognize you. If he wouldn't have recognized him, that would be a problem. If you're coming on behalf of God and nobody recognizes you as that, then you should, talk to Jesus. It's like when I was in my last job that I had it for like a year and a half, and it was like, say that, and as soon as I went in, I told them, I said, hey, I work for the church as well. My husband's a pastor, and they're like, great, all this stuff, that's amazing, awesome. And so as time passed, that showed that they didn't really care, about who I was. But God was on my side because God truly checked them many times. And there were many times that even a person that had strayed from the ways of the Lord, a pastor's kid, I would pray for everybody, of course, pastor's kid would recognize it and say, pray for me, just pray for me. When they say that to you, pray for them. It doesn't matter where they are in life. It doesn't matter how far they've gone in life. Stop judging people like that. I mean, there's things that God is going to be a judge about, but who are you to say that they can't be redeemed? Who are you to say that? I don't care if they went through adultery. I don't care if they went through a divorce. It doesn't matter if they, slept with this person and that person. If God is telling you to pray for them, pray for them. Pray for them. Because nothing's too hard for God. You can't look at somebody and say, they're too far off. Can you imagine if Jesus would have said that to Peter when he got off the boat? He's like, oh, well, you fell. You're drowning now. He didn't do that. I could only imagine if he would have been like, oh, you didn't believe in me. Oh, well. He actually helped him up. I mean, we would do that, right? No, I'm saying we would do the opposite of Jesus because of how human we are. But, right, as believers and ambassadors of Christ, pick him up. Do what Jesus did. Don't let him drown. Don't let him drown. Because people need you. They need you, and they're recognizing you as a believer. Can you imagine if I would say, I'm not praying for you. I know what you did. Can you imagine if I would have said that to them nobody would have asked me later on to pray for them. And I want to pray for people. I do. I really, really do. I want them to be saved because I want them to go to heaven. That's my ultimate goal, to take people to Jesus. Number 3, you have to walk this life with confidence, even when you feel the least confident. You have to walk this life with confidence, even when you feel the least confidence. And I think that's something that we struggle with, to be honest with you. Doesn't matter how old you are. Your age, it doesn't matter in this aspect. Because the enemy's a liar, and he likes to come, right, and discourage you in those little moments, in those little times with those little words and, that little spot that he knows that he can get you with. Verse 18 says, and he answered, I have not troubled Israel. Ahab just said, is that you, troublemaker? Is that you that has been bothering us and has been, taunting us and telling us this and telling us that? I mean, that's basically what he said. And then the reply of Elijah was so confident. And he said, I have not troubled Israel. And then he says, but you have. But you and your father's house have, and that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and have followed the Baals. He was bold enough to say all of this. There was no fear in him whatsoever. When Elijah came to Ahab, he wasn't afraid to speak boldly. He knew what God had told him to say, and he said it as it was. There was no sugarcoating. He said, you've been astray a long time. You know what you should have done, but you didn't. That's how we need to be. We need to be like that. And I have to continue saying this, especially right now in this society, that everybody is telling us what to do and how to say it and how to act and what to wear. And no, I don't believe like you. I can't. I cannot believe like you. Not in some areas, I can't. There's just no way. And no, I'm not going to falter. And no, I don't hate you. And no, I'm not a racist. And no, I'm not being this or that. I'm not. I'm just not. Let's stop. We're calling each other all these names. And it's the saddest thing in the world. Because it's those very people that say, stop name calling. They say, don't call me that. Yeah, they're the ones that are calling you that. Like, Okay, I'm gonna get off that subject. 'Cause- but I'm, so you have to be honest, right? You have to be honest. You have to be confident. You have to say, no, I just don't believe like you. I want to go to heaven. I believe there's a hell, and I don't believe in purgatory. Let's just move forward. Number 4, even when no one else believes the report of the Lord, stand strong and continue to believe, even if you stand alone. Even when no one else believes the report of the Lord, you have to stand strong and continue to believe, even if you stand alone, even if you're by yourself and the people that you thought was going to be there next to you are not. Even those people that you said you're devastated and you're like, I thought they were just going to be there till the very end. Even if those people leave you, you have to stand strong. You have to believe the report of the Lord. Verse 41 says, Then Elijah said to Ahab, Go up and drink, for there is the sound of abundance rain. There was a famine. Okay? Ahab had been telling Obadiah, go this way, and I go this way, and we're going to look everywhere to find food and to find water. They hadn't found anything. And here's Elijah saying, I hear. There is the sound of abundance rain. I hear it. So Ahab went up to eat and drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel. Then he bowed down on the ground. Isn't that amazing? Isn't this such an example that we need to go low? We need to be that low in order for Jesus, right, to come to us. Like a lot of times we're like, oh, I've already given my prayer time. Oh, I've already did my devotional. Well, I'm just too tired. Oh, I just have so many things to do. I'm not a reader. That's not me. Let's stop saying all that because I have to stop saying that too. Pastor's here to testify. I've always said I'm not a reader. Yet guess what? Today I'm a reader. I like to read. I'm going to keep on confessing that. Yes, confessing that until the day that I become a writer. But I have to believe it, right? And that's what Elijah did. He believed it. Maybe he didn't even really hear rain. Who knows? But he still believed it in his heart. He had that faith, small as a mustard seed. And that's what we need to have. As believers, we need to be there. After Elijah had given the word of the Lord and given the command, he stood believing for the promise. He even asked his servant to go 7 times. The servant was probably like, this guy's crazy. Like he's having me go over here and over there, like over here. And that also goes to say something about the servant too, is that he listened, he obeyed. He still obeyed. And yes, I am a slave of Christ. Yes, I am. There's many people that are like, no, I'm not a slave. Yes, I am. I don't know who else can say that, but I am. Because that is the only way that I know that Jesus is going to be speaking to me and taking me up to heaven with him. He wants us to be that because he wants that obedience. You're not a slave oppressed, right? Right? He's not saying that. That's not what the Bible is saying at all. There's no oppression in him. There's joy in him. And because I am a slave to him, then I listen to him. And so that's what a servant is. If God tells me to go 7 times, I'm going to go 7 times. If he tells me to go 20 times, I'm going to go 20 times. When he tells me put the other cheek, I will. After that, I don't know. I'll have my Bible with me. We could just turn to like John 3:16 and show him the Bible and just, I don't know. Shove it in his face. Anyways, but we can't grow weary in well-doing. We just can't. We're so close. I feel like that. I feel like we're so close. I don't know about you, but I feel like we're really close. And if we give up now, then what was all this for? All that hard work, all that pain, all that tribulation, that fire you went through. I want my crown. I want it. I want it because I want to see it. And of course, we're going to give it back to Jesus, but I want to see it first. And I want to say, this is what I did, like pat on the back. I want that. I don't know about you, so I'm not going to grow weary. And even if I do, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to continue. Number 5, being a leader doesn't mean you're exempt from feeling afraid or discouraged. Being a leader doesn't mean you're exempt from feeling afraid or discouraged. God never said that. Find me a verse where God said that you're not going to feel discouraged or that you're not going to feel afraid. He said, don't be afraid. He said, don't be afraid because he knew that we were. He reassured us and he said, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. In chapter 19, from verse 1 to 4, it says, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life, and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die, and said, it is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am not better than my fathers. Here we have a great prophet fleeing to save his life after God performed a mighty miracle through him on Mount Carmel. It was mighty. It was huge. Everybody was talking about it. Can you imagine how the news already spread throughout the nation there, throughout the peoples? And he ran for his life. This is a mighty man of God. Isn't that when the devil likes to come and attack believers the most? After that big and mighty wave, after you have just went to Mount Carmel and seen that fire come down from heaven, after we're on this high of God's glory, what does this teach us though? This teaches us that we should always have the full armor of God. Ephesians 6:10-20. I'm not going to read that. But I'm giving you this because this just needs to be in your heart. I tell my kids all the time, and Ruben, for example, he has read the Bible so many times, but he can't remember verses. Like, he doesn't remember certain verses, and he kind of goes in and out with the words. And I say, okay, stop. Think about one verse. Memorize that for the whole week. Repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. Apply it, and then you're going to memorize it. Stop scrambling, because that's what we do sometimes too. So memorize Ephesians 6:10-12. You put on the full armor of God. And when it talks about the full armor, I don't know if you know this, but back in the days, soldiers, they didn't just say, they weren't like scrambling, putting on their stuff. When we wake up late to go to work and we're scrambling to put on our clothes and stuff, or come into the house of God, and you're scrambling to get your stuff and come in here. You have to be prepared before you come here. You don't come here to get prepared. You don't come here for the pastor to prepare you. Is that what you thought it was? Did you think that's what it was? Well, let me tell you, that's not what it is. You have to have come here already prepared, because guess who's here? Jesus is here, but the devil might be here too. He might just have sent one of his little minions, to come and attack on a Sunday. It happens. We've heard it before many times. I remember being in a service, and I'm never going to forget that, in our old church, and the pastor went not crazy, but he rebuked them because, it was, I want to say it was a witch, just started speaking in tongues, but we all knew it was in tongues, and in the middle of his message, and pastor got up and rebuked that person, and everybody started praying, obviously, because we were all ready. If we weren't ready, that would have not have happened. And when that demon comes, 7 more come after, and 7 more and 7 more, and then we have legions everywhere. And that's so real, and people need to, that's another, preaching, and I've done that before too. But yes, demons are real, and those spirits are real. And we can't hide from that, and we can't not teach that in the church, because then we're not going to believe in hell, and there is a hell again. Okay? And I'm scared of hell. I don't want to say it any other way. I'm just scared to go there. I am. I want to go to heaven. I want to go with Jesus. I'm just being honest. If I have hot flashes and I'm dying, I cannot imagine. I'm just saying, right? Andre talking about it on Sunday. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. I don't. So Ephesians 6:10-20. Put on the full armor of God. I'm good right now. I was like that on Sunday though. So because the world right now is trying to silence the believers by making them afraid to speak the truth. This is really what's happening right now. I don't know if you're noticing that, but the devil right now, he's trying to do that, and he's doing it so subtly. He's doing it so quietly. And unfortunately, many believers that call themselves believers are just going with it. They don't have the full armor of God. They don't have the full armor of God. And they're afraid and discouraged, and then they say, well, God's not here. Well, God's not in the midst of this. When in all reality, God's never left. He's probably closer than ever in those times. That's when he's picking you up, right? And you see those footprints in the sand. Because he's picking you up and he's holding you. But the world right now is trying to silence the believers so much. And we need to recognize it. We need to wake up spiritually. We need to wake up, because it is so sad to see many people falling astray. And I'm not just saying believers. I'm talking about pastors that have been on the pulpit for years, and evangelists and false prophets out there. That's who I'm talking about. But greater judgment is on them. And I'm not saying this in a bad way, but there is a greater judgment, because they were responsible. We are responsible. And that's why we need to memorize these verses and put on the full armor of God. When you go into battle, I was saying earlier, the soldiers, they didn't just scramble to put on their helmet, to put on their breastplate. They took their time. They took their time to put that on. Are you taking your time as a believer to put on the full armor of God? That is the question for you today. Are you taking your time? Because if you're not taking your time, then you're not doing enough. Then you're not doing it right. Because God is a patient God, okay? And he's an orderly God. He's not going to say, get up and go and just, and he's going to throw you out there like to the wolves. No, he's going to tell you, get up and go. And he's going to give you that faith. He's going to give you that courage, because you're in him, because you have the full armor of God. So before you come to church, put on the full armor of God and be ready. Number 6, the last one. Through your discouragement, God still wants to use you. Through your discouragement, God still wants to use you. Verse 5 in chapter 19 says, then as he lay, remember Elijah, under a broom tree, suddenly an angel, he had just asked God that to die, right? Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back the second time and touched him. And we know that he went a third time, right? And that he went into a cave, right? And that Jesus came to him and said, Elijah, what are you doing here? Even through his discouragement, even through his fear, God still wanted to use him. Elijah is hiding, afraid, discouraged, alone. Here's where God shows up. He reassures Elijah that he is still with him and that he can still use him if he is willing. All he needs is a willing vessel. That's all he needs. So if you're depressed, if you're angry, if you're whatever it is, wherever you are, but you still want to be used, that's all you got to say. Because I have been angry. I'm the type of person that gets angry at a situation. And in that situation, I'm like, God, I still want to hear from you. Yeah, I'm still mad, and I'm like, where are you? I can't hear you right now. Why aren't you here? It's like, I'm yelling at God, but I'm not. God still shows up, you know? He has showed up in many forms, and he can show up in many forms. I mean, I remember one time I was livid, and I was ready to like say, I am done with church, with people, with family, with everybody. And he sent an angel of God, literally, and to calm me down to the point where I was upset that I wasn't angry. I was upset that I was in peace. Yes. I was like, why am I so calm? And I was looking at him and I was like, why am I not crying? Why don't I want to leave? Because God comes. God comes in many forms. And it says that here because he wasn't in the fire, he wasn't in the earthquake, he wasn't in this big, he came in the still small voice. He came in that still small voice to me one day. I mean, it was so quiet that I was like, you need to be yelling right now. And he wasn't. God sometimes comes like that. We just have to, I just have to thank God for that because who am I to deserve that, right? Who am I to deserve that? I'm like a spoiled brat here, and God's like, you're okay. You're fine. I still love you. He's so good. So good. Then, so notice what God does. He gives Elijah what he needs, right? Verses 5 through 8, I just read it, where he gave him food. Then he tells him what's coming next. God not only, it's like Abraham, when he told Abraham to go, he didn't tell him where to go or anything like that. But he did tell him the promises beforehand. You remember that? Remember that story? Where he says that you're going to have many descendants and you're going to have all this and all that. And then he said, go. He didn't tell him where, but he had already given him that promise. Sometimes we forget too quick about the promises of God. And all we hear is go, and we're like, where? Why? Who? How much? How long? And God's like, didn't I just give you like 10,000 promises? But I still want to go nowhere. And God's like, really? I mean, I'm telling you, he's such a good father that he doesn't, we need to be more patient with our children. So he then tells him what's coming next. And the angel of the Lord said, come back the second time and touched him and said, arise and eat because the journey is too great for you. He didn't know where he was going. God did, though. In the midst of this encouragement, Elijah still doesn't have the trust that he should in what the angel of the Lord is saying to him. And we read that he goes into a cave again. And then God still comes to him in his goodness. In his goodness. And he says, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains, broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. And we all know that he came in that still small voice. In his goodness, God still came in that still small voice. And you can't miss that still small voice. You can't miss it. And many of us are missing it as believers. Then verse 13 to 18 says, so it was when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I've been very zealous of the Lord, God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Then the Lord said to him, go, return on your way into the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, and then he tells him what to do to anoint all these people here. Because no matter what, God is looking for obedience in his believers. That's the end of the line right there. That's bottom line. That's all he's looking for. He's not looking for you to complain. He's not looking for you to say, God, don't you see what's happening? And God, we're being persecuted, and God this and God that. God sees that. He knows. He's not oblivious to it. He's really not. Bottom line is he's looking for your obedience. And that's why I had to say that testimony earlier today, because I know I could have stayed home, and I know I could have just been like, oh, I'm super tired. I could just Go home and just stay and sleep. And God's like, well, that's not what I told you to do. That's not what I've told you to do. And, this right here had came to me sometime in January. Wasn't even now. It was like, God was like, you're going to say that at one point, and when I tell you to say it, you're going to have to be ready. I didn't know he was going to say it to me when I didn't feel good, you know? And when I didn't want to come and I wanted to stay, you know what I mean? Like, I just want to chill, God. You tell me today, now? And God's like, yeah, that's, don't go back into that cave. Stop running from Jezebel, because greater is he that is in you than him that is in the world. And right now, in this moment, 2021, Satan is out there. He is. And his demons are out there, and the false prophets are out there, and all of this evil is out there. But please don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because God is still with you just like he was with Elijah. And if you just stop for 1 second and listen to that still small voice, you'll hear him. I think many of us are missing it. We're missing that still small voice because of whatever you feel in the line. And so we need to ask ourselves, and we need to talk to ourselves, and we need to say and encourage ourselves just like David did. David encouraged himself, and you remember what David went through, and at the end, what happened? He was still a man after God's heart. He was still a man after God's heart. And God still loved him, and I believe God took him in, and God was with him because of his heart and who he was and his love for Jesus. So, believer, leader in God, today I ask you, where are you? Have you taken up the full armor of God? Are you being obedient to him? Are you awake? Are you hiding in the cave? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Not physically, but spiritually. Where are you spiritually? Because we need to be awake in this time more than ever. And, harder times are to come. This is nothing. I think this is nothing. There's many being persecuted. I asked Pastor the other day, and I said, what if it does come to the point where, that chip is shown to us and we're here to see it? Are we going to come face to face and say no? What about the food for our kids? And what about this? And what about that? I mean, all of this happened, and you think about it. And that's when you really have to come into a realization and say, I am for the Lord. I am his follower. As afraid as you are, maybe in that time, you still have this faith. And God's going to see that. God's going to see that, because ultimately, that's what we were made for. You hear all of these reports in the Bible of what they went through. We haven't even gone through a third of it. Not even a third of it. So yes, we say, "Come, Lord, come," but in the meanwhile, we have to be obedient. Obedience is key in all of this, and I hope that these basic guidelines have helped you in this story that we just read, because it's okay to feel discouraged. It's okay to feel afraid at times. It's okay to feel like we can't. But in the midst of that is when God is the strongest. And in the midst of that is when you need to give it over to God. Because it's not about you, and it's not about what's going on. It's about him. And it's about his word. We need to really listen to him, because he's trying to tell his believers right now a lot. He's trying to give you some secrets. He really is. I believe that. So, amen. That was it. I don't know if Pastor wants the mic again. He wants, no? Thank you, everyone, for watching on social media. God bless you. Have a good night.